Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can. Yep, we're
Yeah.
on.
Oh, and I've got subtitles running. Okay. Um, so yeah, George and I guess are a couple of like salty old sea dogs in terms of accessibility. We've been doing this for a little while in multiple organisations. So what we thought, both of us are new in posts in organisations that we haven't previously been involved with directly. So we thought it was interesting to kind of take stock about, you know, what might you do when you go somewhere new and you're looking at kind of enhancing developing further a digital accessible culture. And we're also going to talk to you a little bit about some work we've done with a sector in the UK that really does need a kind of bit of support and a bit of kind of pump priming to help it get started with digital accessibility. So this is a bit of a kind of review of where we are, but also some of the opportunities to kind of go back to basics and think, if you were starting again, what would you do, you know, with all the stuff that we've tried and probably failed with over the time that we've been doing it. Minimize. Okay, so I'm very new at UCL. Previously, I was at the University of Kent, and it's really lovely to see lots of my old pals from Kent today continuing to do amazing stuff. So new at UCL, there was already an amazing digital accessibility project that happened pre-pandemic, you know, sparked by the public sector websites and mobile applications accessibility regulations. So already lots of really brilliant work to build on. So the work I've been doing in these first couple of weeks at UCL is obviously meeting key stakeholders to just assess where they are in terms of their digital accessibility maturity and confidence, particularly related to any products or services that they own, because I think it's really important as accessibility people that we don't become the arbiters of all that's good. You know, we can help people with their accessibility, but they're the best people to judge whether that system or service is meeting its requirements, and we're just kind of helping them along the way. But we want accessibility to be done at the point of delivery and, you know, in pre-contract and things like that, the procurement stages. So I think it's really important that we're equipping people with skills and confidence rather than being the people who are the kind of buffers for all of this stuff and a kind of single point of failure, which I think hopefully we're moving away from, but was definitely a model that I was familiar with perhaps in the past. So identifying lots of priorities for big systems, you know, the bigger the system, the more kind of fundamental it is to the life of the institution or the organization, the number of users it has, clearly are things that you'd want to prioritize because they have a bigger impact when perhaps they're not accessible. So they're the things we're really looking to identify some of those accessibility opportunities in, and to obviously put right any barriers that we identify. But I'm hopefully people are aware that I'm kind of equally keen on usability. So to use those accessibility barriers and opportunities that we identify to further up our game in terms of delivering really clean and crisp systems that just work for everyone. And actually something that's increasingly on my mind is that so many good things happened. I mean, you'd never wish it. COVID, absolutely awful. But in terms of online learning, lots of really accessible things happened, and really probably much more quickly than anyone would have anticipated pre-COVID. You know, things, we had to really argue about recording lectures and streaming, and it feels like those battles have been won. But for how long? If we then go back to fully physical attendance, will some of those things unravel? So I'm really keen to kind of document those good practices and try and do what we can to hold back the tide on those.
I think it's over to me now. It's interesting because I haven't been officially in the higher education sector before. I've flitted about, going to the Home Office, central government, local government, and being involved in various other sort of different bits and pieces. So this was a very new experience for me, kind of jumping in, being in charge of the opportunity to build up my own team here to deal with digital accessibility. But it was interesting how similar my experience was to Ben's, as we've both started at the same time and both been discussing how our sort of first months or so have been going. I came into Westminster and probably really shocked my immediate management by presenting them with a list of about 100 questions that I had to ask what's going on, to try and get the lay of the land. I have that list written down. I'm writing a blog, so if anyone wants to know the first 100 questions I asked in joining a university to deal with digital accessibility, I will publish those shortly. I'm seeing some thumbs up. Okay, all right. Now I've had to commit to it. But it was really nice to come in, as Ben said. Coming into Westminster, I had the same experience. They'd already, over the pandemic, progressed a digital accessibility project. They'd already laid some amazing groundwork for basic good practices. I've had a great experience engaging with the learning and development team, one of which, one of my colleagues, my new colleagues, Amina, is sitting somewhere in the chat right now. She's been great, already delivering a lot of basic skills learning to a lot of our colleagues. So it's fantastic to have all of this to kind of build on. It's like pushing on an open door, which is really fantastic. And as Ben says, I've had the same experience going out, engaging with as many as possible to try and understand the different kinds of pinch points we've got. So I've been talking with obviously all the IT teams about digital systems, academics, procurement teams, the learning and development team, as I've mentioned, the employability teams, disability support, and loads of other people to try and really find where those problems are and answer some of those first 100 questions that I had. Another good thing that I've discovered in my joining Westminster is they have a colleague disability network, which is really just starting to find its strength, and there are some great advocates there that want to contribute to having their voice heard, to helping us make sensible decisions about the products that we buy and make sure that they work for all of our staff and all of our students. So it's been an interesting road of discovery for me as well. Should we move on to the next slide, because I think we need to keep to time.
Okay, so alongside our work, George and I have been doing some research in partnership with the Thomas Pocklington Trust, which is a charity that looks after the interests of particularly young people with visual impairments in education. And they asked us to have a particular look at further education, and having analysed 427 further education college websites, looking mainly at the presence of an accessibility statement, which is the kind of public declaration of accessibility health that is used to demonstrate compliance with these new regulations. It became quite clear that further education needs a bit more support. Some of the messaging that perhaps has reached higher education really well, and maybe central government really wasn't reaching certain parts of the education system in the United Kingdom, and further education was really struggling. We found that only 13% of colleges had accessibility statements, which was compared to 53% local government and 49% of universities. We also interviewed a lot of students in further education, and we identified that was a symptom, that the lack of the accessibility statement was a symptom of a general lack of awareness of accessibility opportunities to deliver accessible by design digital content that would allow people to be much more self-sufficient and to maximise the value of assistive technologies that they may wish to use. So we felt that we needed to offer some kind of high level and then some practical recommendations to this sector that really felt like it was just beginning, that there was some fabulous practice locally, but it certainly wasn't seemingly distributed as we might kind of see rather more with the higher education sector. So some of the more strategic recommendations we would make, I don't think these will be unfamiliar to people who have engaged with digital accessibility at higher education, but clearly we'd want this to be led by college management, college leadership. You need to be seeing accessible by design approaches in newsletters, all, you know, publications from college leadership, strategy. It just needs to be popping up all over the place so that it's clearly everyone's responsibility. I think that's a real challenge that we all have in promoting this work, is to get accessibility to be that embedded that people see it as part of the business as usual and not an extra thing or something you do once you've done everything else. It needs to be beautifully interwoven. What we also found was that the assisted learning support teams were doing an awful lot of heavy lifting. They were utterly excusing the kind of inaccessible practice throughout the rest of the colleges. And we felt their skills and experiences could be better used to, you know, spread the message wider of inclusive practice. If we could only get a bit more inclusive practice in place to free them up to do that, because they were well placed to do that. We'd also like to see better support for assistive technology. Not necessarily all the students we spoke to even knew that assistive technologies were available to help them, and certainly didn't have access to them. And we'd like other students in FE to be, you know, equipped with accessibility skills to support students working alongside them, but also as they go out into the public sector themselves.
I think that brings me on to the practical recommendations, and I realise we've already eaten into our time for questions, so I'll keep this brief. Basically, lots of practical stuff that can be done. Implement a digital accessibility policy. I can see we've already got questions in the chat. Map the extent of what's going on. Obviously, how can you deal with a problem unless you know how deep it runs? Policy and process, obviously very important. Training for staff. There's been stuff in the chat about top down and bottom up. Need the top down support to really get somewhere organisationally, not just from enthusiasts. All of this stuff that we've just said over the last couple of slides is still very, very relevant to HE. So I really do encourage people to go and take a look at that report, because we get into it in more detail than we've kind of got time for today. And that leads us on to our last slide, I guess, which is just to say thank you from Ben and I. So please feel free to get in touch with us. I'll be sharing the blog through some of those channels. I can see Rebecca's asked, could we take a look at the digital accessibility policy? Ben and I have got some really interesting stuff coming up about that for our two organisations, so watch out for some news on that as well. Finally, just a quick plug, I've got 2 job openings available at the University of Westminster within my team to come and help me deliver digital accessibility. So if anyone's interested in those, you can find those also advertised through Twitter and LinkedIn that I've already shared. So please feel free to apply. It's a great organisation that I've just started with, and I'd love to have a couple of really passionate team members with me as well. And I know Ben's got some jobs coming up too, so doubly watch out.
And you can see what happens. I'll just say George's avatar there, the picture of George in his knight's outfit with the sword. That's what happens when people don't follow accessible practice. So just protect yourselves.
That was my lockdown hobby. I started collecting armor because I stayed inside too long and clearly lost some marbles.
Thank you so much, both of you. And just to echo what they've said, if you want to work with 2 people that really care about accessibility, then apply for those jobs, because you won't get 2 better people who are passionate about accessibility. So yeah, definitely take them up on that. I'm so sorry, guys. We've run out of time for questions, but I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to stick in the chat, if that's okay. But we have to move on now, I'm afraid. But it's been so lovely to have you back. Thank you so much. And yeah, we hope to see you again in the future.
Thank you very much.